I want to talk about measurement. Not measurement in terms of kilometers or pounds or ounces. Social measurement. How we measure the success of our community, of our government, of corporations. How we measure the impact of something. Now, to be fair, you may be wondering, why does this matter? I'm guessing not all of you have spent your life, like me, since the early 1990s, pondering measurement-based questions. I was in grad school at the time, studying economics, international relations, game theory, and statistics. So I am that nerd. And things like the internet, AI, massive computing power weren't really a thing yet. So that means, what that means is I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time. So why does it matter? Let's start with a very simple question. What words do you want to use to describe your society? I took a very non-scientific poll of friends, family, and colleagues and came up with a list. Thriving, inclusive, productive, courageous, disruptive, equitable, kind, and empathetic. But the words that I hear more of in the news, on social media, and in daily conversation are fragmented, disconnected, lack of trust, misinformation, recession, hate, racism, and inequity. So where are we? I'm confident we're somewhere between the bookends, somewhere between inclusive and fragmented, somewhere between productive and recession, somewhere between kindness and hatred. But how do we know? How do we know where we are? We need some way to assess this. We need a measure. The default metric that we tend to use for measure of success or impact are GDP, corporate profit, and personal income. These are all measures in dollars and cents, and we use them to measure success. A person is successful if they make a lot of money. A company is successful if it has high profit. Our government is successful if we have GDP growth, and art has value when it's expensive. So let's go back to the words we want to use to describe our community. We're historically very poor at measuring these concepts. Even equity, we've started to define that as pay equity in dollars and cents. But why is this? Why don't we measure this? Is it because it's hard? Maybe. Probably, actually. But I believe that it's also because of the dominance of economic thinking. We've been taught for decades now that the business of business is business. So does that mean that I work for the economy? That we all do? I'd prefer to think that the economy works for us, that economic growth is a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. Now, these are not new ideas, and they're not mine alone. I actually take great comfort thinking that there's fellow nerds out there thinking similar thoughts. But where does that leave us? What's our next step here? Back to GDP, profit, and personal income. It's a very one-dimensional approach to quantifying and measuring success. And candidly, not the measure I like to think of for my own personal success or the success of my friends and family. The good news is we've gotten better at starting to measure some of these concepts. But first, why are GDP, profit, and personal income incomplete? And that's all they are. They're still valid measures. They just need to be augmented. We use them because we think we understand them. We believe we know what they mean. We think that $200 is worth more than $100. But is it? Is it that simple? So I could take a job, it's a 40-hour week, with a company I don't really respect or like, with a team I don't particularly enjoy, with a long commute that takes me away from my friends and family for $200. Or I can work the same 40-hour week for a company I like, with a team that I enjoy working with a shorter commute for $100. Now, our definition of income would tell us 200 is more than 100. But to me, it isn't. Because at that $200 job, I would not be thriving as a person. Once we start to introduce these non-economic concepts of success, it becomes a little less clear whether 200 is more than 100. So these limitations of measures become limitations of action. And let that sink in for a minute. Limitations of action. Suddenly we're back to this notion that the business of business is business once again. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave all of us in this room, or our country, our communities, our society? That's the common denominator right there. Us, people. We are labor. We are supply. We are demand. We are the consumers. Without us, is there actually even an economy? So let me ask, can we have a thriving economy without a thriving population? We tested this. We had a really supernatural experiment, and I'm sorry if this is a trigger for some of us, during COVID-19. The world came to a grinding halt. GDP fell around the world. Supply chains ceased. And we demonstrated that physical health is actually a really critical component of economic health. And we've gotten better at measuring physical health. But that's just one component. We're not so good at, for example, measuring mental health. How do we quantify feelings of psychological inclusion in the workplace? Still hard to do. Now, the good news here is we've gotten better at measuring social impact. It's not a lost cause. Things like the Augmented Human Development Index, or AHDI, has started doing this. They quantify and measure and track human development. They look at 4 specific areas: healthy life, education, a decent standard of living, and civil and political freedom. You'll notice I didn't actually say the word economy anywhere in there. Economics only comes into play through a decent standard of living. In this case, it's a means to an end. It helps us achieve the societal goals that we want to achieve. And this is a really critical component. There are other social metrics and indices popping up more and more these days, which I see as a very good thing. We've got the World Happiness Report. There's the Global Social Progress Index and the country of Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index. Bit of a play on GDP. But these are still incomplete measures, much like GDP, profit, and income. These measures are at the country level, a very on-average approach. So we're a little bit stuck again. What does that mean for us, for me as a human? We're all different. People are different. People are emotional. We need to capture the complexities of the human experience. If we can't capture that, we can't measure it. If we can't measure it, we can't action it. So let's talk about 2 letters that are becoming fairly common right now. AI. AI, throw in a little natural language processing and some massive computing power for good measure, things that did not exist back in the 1990s when I started pondering my measurement questions. AI can track things like sentiment. It can look at our use of language. It can track news, radio, social media. It can look at our use of symbols and logic and language and come up with things like information about feelings of social fragmentation, feelings of discord, feelings of inequity, disparity, feelings of psychological safety. And it can do it in seconds. It can troll through terabytes of data so quickly. Things that used to take us years, data that we couldn't gather, information we didn't have access to. Now, to be clear, we still need humans to analyze and understand that data. I am not talking about setting up an algorithm and letting it run free. We need people. For centuries, data has been used and abused for a number of different purposes. So when I think about where we are as a society, the level of increasing social fragmentation and discord, I keep wondering, how do I know what impact my behavior, our behavior, is having on our society? The economics nerd in me comes back to the notion that we do in fact need a thriving economy to have a thriving population. And it cuts both ways. This is that interdisciplinary, interdependent question. This demonstrates that it's a multidimensional problem. I'd like to think that if we are able to measure what truly matters to us as a society, we will be able to create a just, equitable, and inclusive, thriving society for all of our future generations. If we can start to measure what truly matters, measure will no longer limit action. So as you leave here today, please remember that all of us, our government and corporations, are worth so much more than the money that you make. Thank you.